It is no secret that my time as a chief of staff has majorly shaped my outlook on all things scaling and running a business. So today I am so excited to sit down with a fellow dreamer and doer to talk about not only the role, but also how she has founded a business around ensuring that chiefs of staff are not only surviving, but thriving, which is fantastic. I'm so excited. Welcome to the Managed Chaos podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Katrina Purcell, and today I am joined by the wonderful Clara Ma. Clara is the founder and CEO of Ask a Chief of Staff, the premier resource for chiefs of staff looking to secure high-impact roles and drive results. Prior to founding her company, Clara was a chief of staff to the CEO of Hugging Face, a unicorn AI startup, where she helped shepherd the company from its Series A to Series B. Clara and I have a lot in common there. After serving as chief of staff, she went on to become the program director of OnDeck's Series B Chief of Staff Fellowship, growing its membership base from 80 to over 400 plus chiefs of staff. Clara, that is impressive growth.
Thank you so much. Well, it's really exciting to see the chief of staff role continue to grow. And so I think that growth just correlates with how much the role has grown in the last 5 to 10 years.
I'm so excited to talk about this because I also feel like it's one of the most misunderstood roles out there. So it's like you see a chief of staff role and it could be anything on the gamut of responsibilities. And so I can't wait to talk more. But let's think about when you first thought about running your own business, right? And so how did you design a business that could adapt? The chief of staff role is always adapting, right? The person in that role is constantly adapting. So how do you design that so it's not just growing, but it's really adapting?
Yeah, I like to start with my accidental founder story as a real life example of adapting truly. I never set out to be a founder. I knew somewhere down the line I'd love to work for myself, but I always thought it would be in a consulting type of setting. But when I left my role at OnDeck, I gave myself a little bit of time off to think about what I wanted to do next. And the thing that just kept coming up in my brain was chief of staff, right? And so I figured, okay, my work here isn't done. What can I do to give myself a little bit of runway, but also keep working in the chief of staff space? And so that was my first adaptation, I guess, was to go from being on my own self-given sabbatical to, okay, how can I generate income for myself? And started the bank account so that I could separate out the work that I was doing with my own personal runway, right? And so when I first started Ask a Chief of Staff, it was really just a recruiting business. It was solely focused on matching chiefs of staff to executives. We would get paid a success fee if we found the right person. And I figured I could just do that kind of indefinitely until I figured out what I wanted to do next again. That ended up being super successful. Within the first 3 months, we were able to place 3 chiefs of staff. And I figured, okay, there's something here. But also I knew that the slow season was starting because hiring is extremely cyclical, right? Sometimes there's a ton of roles. Sometimes people stop hiring. The macro economy could affect what you are doing as a business. And so I wanted to build in another stream of revenue that could keep us going when hiring slowed down. And I think that's the first real big adaptable milestone that we took on was, okay, what is something that could be a more steady source of revenue that we can really continue to maintain so that if hiring slows down, we're not completely out of luck. And that's where the community model really came into play. And ultimately, we built a community because our main North Star here at Ask a Chief of Staff is that we want to be the go-to resource for all things chief of staff. Hiring for the role and landing the position is just one part of that journey. And having a community that people can continue to learn from each other and talk to each other and have this peer network is another part of the journey. And so when it comes to adaptability, I always tell folks like, yes, you can try a lot of different things, right? Like you can always try a different thing within your business, but remember what your ultimate goal is. Like what is the ultimate North Star that you are fighting towards? And are the things that you're doing continuing to move towards that needle? If not, then that's not the adaptation that you want to bring into your organization.
I love that. I'm going to go back to one of the first things you said about being an accidental founder, because that was definitely something for me too. I always thought I don't have a grand idea, right? The big vision or but I do want to go and if one of my friends has an idea, I will help them make it happen, right? I will execute it. I will do all the things, but I never thought of myself as the person who had like the grand big vision and big idea. And so I was also a bit of an accidental founder, which is why I went into consulting and working with people who have great ideas and making them a reality just because I was ready to go work for myself. The chief of staff role can be pretty intense, and doing two of them back to back was a lot. And so that's where my company was born from.
Hmm.
So what chaos did you face building as chief of staff, and how did you manage it? You were thriving. I think it's the 3-year anniversary, right?
Yeah, we just celebrated our 3-year anniversary in October of 2025. And so I would say, chaos comes with building a company. There's a million things to do, and it always feels like everything is a priority. I mean, in the beginning, I was working off of a Google spreadsheet and my personal email and, like a very basic business credit card to like charge subscriptions to. And so there's always that kind of chaos of, okay, there's always more to do. You can always do something. You can always answer another email. You can always reach out to one more person. And so really trying to understand like, okay, what part of the chaos do I want to tackle today? And which
Mhm.
part can I kind of kick the can on till next week or maybe never so that we can really prioritize the things that are most important. I also found myself starting to do a lot more administrative work once business started to get off the
Mhm.
ground, right? Like once we actually made placements, I had to send out invoices and then like there was a lot more inbound coming in. And so one of the first things I did about 3 months into the business was hire an EA, which I think a lot of people are always like, how can you spend so much money so quickly? But I knew the time that I was going to get back was going to be worth it. And then I could focus all of my time on the actual recruiting part of the process that I couldn't teach to anyone just quite yet. Or even start a new revenue stream, which is build out the community. Building out a community, there's so much back end work, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of it that you do manually to start. So you can understand how to build a system around it. I mean, as a fellow chief of staff, you get thrown into the chaos. You try
Yeah.
to like make sense of it, make a playbook. And then once I had that playbook, now I had someone to delegate that to so that I didn't have to be part of the in the weeds work anymore. So yeah, I think chaos comes with building any company, but it is also why I love doing what I do, whether it was being a chief of staff or working at early stage startups. Like, I do love coming into the room, seeing it a bit of a mess, and then being like, okay, like, how can we start to clean this up and put together some systems and processes that are going to make this way smoother moving forward?
I think that's such a chief of staff comment, right? I love coming into a messy room and being like, how can I
Yeah.
make this all make sense? The title Manage Chaos came from my time as a chief of staff. Someone who I had worked with said, you're better at managing chaos than anyone I know. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's the name for the podcast. Great.
Yeah, it's very apt.
So, and I think it's not only business, right? Life is chaos, right? Everything you do
Mhm,
is chaotic. And I mean, both of us live in New York City, talk about chaos. And I think,
mhm,
the more you learn to deal with chaos and run with it and adapt and pivot, the better everything in life will be, because
absolutely.
you can't truly get away from chaos. So, how do you help? This is such a tricky relationship, right? Chief of staff and the person they're supporting. How do
Mhm.
you help executives and chief of staff work better together? What does that look like?
This is a role that I think there's a lot of introspection that you need to do before you step into it. And then if you're a CEO or an executive who's hiring for this role, I think you also need to do a lot of introspection, right? So you need to really understand what your working style is, what you're really looking for. Are you looking for a force multiplier, someone who can kind of amplify the things that you're doing? Or are you looking for more of a compliment to help you pick up some of the balls that you are dropping, or you're like just not interested in juggling yourself? And
Yeah.
so, what I really try to do when I sit down with an executive and we do a job intake, we understand what it is that they're looking for, is to get super, super clear about what kind of chief of staff they want. Like I said, there's the two archetypes of force multiplier versus complement. There's people who are going to think more strategically versus people who are going to be more operational executors. And so, really understanding what that executive is looking for and then being able to match the right chief of staff is super important here. I mean, I always tell people like, you were a chief of staff, I was a chief of staff. We maybe probably wouldn't be a good chief of staff to each other's principals because they have different working styles. Like we have different strengths that we come to the table with as well. So really understanding that executive working style, really understanding what is the executive's zone of genius and how they should be spending their time. And then how does a chief of staff come in to help them spend as much time in that zone of genius as possible?
Yeah, so one of my roles, I was coming in as brand new. They had never had a chief of staff before.
Hmm.
He just knew he needed one, right?
Yep.
So it's like the buzz on the street is like, you should get one. And so everyone's like, oh, I should have one. It's like the hottest new purse, right? And so when I started, I said, okay, what are you looking to get out of it? I had already been in a role where I had gone through an IPO with the company. And so public company life was not for me. It's not very fun. And so when I first started, I said, what are you looking to get out of it? What do you, and he's like, this feels like therapy. And I said, well, it is a little bit, right? You need to be able to tell me, what are your strengths? What are your things that you're looking for? What is, how does that work into the dynamic of this role? This isn't just
Hmm.
a regular role. Like, we're going to be
Right.
really closely intertwined. We did a lot of travel together. We did a lot of things together. And you have to be able to work well with that person and understand where to pick up. But it was interesting because he definitely thought that it was a little too therapeutic at the beginning when I kept
Mm.
asking, what is your strength? What is your weakness? What are you,
Yeah.
what are you looking to achieve? How do you help people who the principal may not really know what they want? Like, how do you work through that?
Yeah. One exercise that I encourage a lot of chiefs of staff to do day one or, when they immediately start the job is to sit down with your principal. And sometimes people don't like to have as much of the like emotional conversation about like, what are you good at? What are you not good at? So I try to make it a little bit more quantitative, and I'll had my principal draw me a pie chart of how they're spending their time right now. So, like one of the things that I know my principal is spending a ton of time on was hiring. We were a Series A company. We had just raised. We knew we needed to grow and scale the company in terms of just human capital. So
Mhm.
he was spending 50% of his time on hiring, and then 15% of his time strategic deep work and whatever else it was. So I had him draw me that pie chart, and then I had him draw me his ideal pie chart. Like, how would you actually like to be spending your time? He was like 25% of my time on hiring. Like, I want to do so much less of it. I know I need to be involved. Obviously, we're still early. I still need to be there to like do the close. I need to talk to the people. They are still going to be working closely with me, but like just all of that front top of funnel, like applications, all that, like I just don't want to do it. So having those two pie charts next to each other gave me a really good sense of, okay, how do we get from A to B, right? I was like, great. I have done tons of hiring in the past. I've worked with ATSs. I can set up a pipeline, all of that kind of stuff. So I can take all of that off of your plate so that you only need to be involved in the back half of the interview process. And I think that's a really tactical way that you can help your principal kind of understand where they want to get to, right? They have probably a general idea, but when you tie it to something like, you only have, these 24 hours in a day and this many in a week, they're going to start to think about how they're to best spend their time, and doing that calendar audit is super helpful there. So that's one of the tools that we share in our community for our members to go out to do. And then you should be revisiting that pie chart often, right? Like
Right.
every quarter, are you closer to what that is? That might change. I want to do even less hiring now that we've hired this many people, or maybe hiring is not a priority this quarter. And so when you consistently do this exercise time and time again, you're going to have more insight into your principal. And then, the rest of the stuff will come over time, the trust, the foundation, all of that will continue to grow, but at least you have this one piece in front of you that you can tactically use immediately.
That's perfect. You mentioned sharing that within your community. So the community is such an important part of this. And when I first started in my chief of staff role, I was thrown into it. I was already working at the company. COVID happened. They needed a chief of staff, and they were like, "We think you'd be good at this. You're good at project management. Here, go do that." I
Hmm.
wish I had found a community of people who knew what I was supposed to be doing, because I had no idea. So when you think about your community and community intelligence, the why is that your secret weapon? And what is this that you're really building?
Yeah, one thing that I like to say often is that nobody knows everything, but everybody knows something, right? And so two heads are better than one. Like between the two people, you're going to have more information. And if you have a community of 200, 300, 400, you're going to have even more information. And so when I built this community, I always say that building Ask a Chief of Staff is very healing for my own inner chief of staff, because it's something that I wish that I had as well. What I was doing was I was reaching out and cold DMing hundreds of other chiefs of staff and saying like, can I have 15 minutes of your time? Like, how do you do this role? Like, how do you measure yourself? How do you benchmark yourself for success if there's nobody else like you? And I got so much incredible knowledge from all of these chiefs of staff. The thing that was surprising to me, that even though I was only a few months into my role, a few weeks even, is that every chief of staff asked me back the same questions because they had never talked to anybody else either about what this role looks like. And so that experience really kind of gave me the seedling of there has to be a better way to aggregate all of this knowledge and give this to this extremely impactful group of people who are influencing CEOs and executives, but don't have any resourcing themselves.
Mhm.
And so, the thing that we really focus on is that a lot of our speakers, our mentors are all community members and chiefs of staff themselves. This is not, somebody coming in and being like, I'm a professor, I'm going to teach you all these things about being a chief of staff, but instead really kind of tapping into the knowledge of the commons and having everybody share a little bit of what they've gone through and their experiences. And that has led to a really robust community where people feel like they're getting the support and the help that they need, but they also feel like they're contributing back with the things that they have gone through themselves.
Yeah, I love that because the chief of staff role is really not a theoretical role, right? I mean, it's very
Hmm.
different depending on what company, what stage, what principal you're supporting. And so it's so important for that real-time feedback as opposed to sort of a book of this is how you should do it. So
Exactly.
if someone is a current chief of staff or if someone's looking to hire a chief of staff, how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, go to our website, askachiefofstaff.com. You can join our community from there, or you can put in a hiring request and we'll reach out to you to schedule some time so we can understand what it is that you're looking for and find you the right person. You know, end of the year is always a great time to really kind of use up those L&D budgets and also start your hiring process so that you can bring somebody on and they can hit the new year, hit the ground running. So we're excited to hear from everyone. And if you're a chief of staff or you're hiring for a chief of staff, please come look us up.
Yeah, so we will put all of that in the show notes. Thank you, Clara, so much for this wonderful conversation. I am on a mission to make people better understand what the chief of staff role is, and I think you're amplifying that. I love also Clara's LinkedIn content, so definitely follow her there. You can find out more from the show notes and find us on the next episode of Managed Chaos Podcast.
Outsourcing your US tech talent shouldn't be hard. With Pobble.io, we deliver high quality teams on demand and provide huge cost savings to your business. Try it now at Pobble.io. Mention the amazing guys at Managed Chaos when you email us and get a free market data report. Email contact@Pobble.io.